So with this large piece of clay, I'm actually going to make the lid for this piece, and then I'm going to make the jar. So when you throw in a hump, you only center the part that you're using, so you can see I'm only going to use it from here up for the lid. So for the lid with a flange, I always recommend making the lid first and then making the jar second, because it just fits better that way. And usually what I'll do is I'll make several lids, you know, 2 or 3, and in the end just keep the one that fits the best. You can measure a little bit, but all right, for this type of lid, you actually make it upside down. You start it kind of like a bowl. And the only difference is you need to keep the top a little bit thicker, because I'm going to make the flange out of this piece right here. Thin it out at the bottom, keep this nice and thick. So for the top, I'm going to start doing this with my fingers, just pushing down and kind of separating that. And then I'm going to use a tool. A wooden kidney like this, that's a pretty good tool. Because you want the flange to be just straight up and down. Okay, so that's going to be the flange. That's what's going to sit inside the pot. The rest of this stuff is going to get trimmed off. So you can trim a little bit off now, and I'm going to do a lot of shaving later. All right, now to take this off, I just use my potter's needle. I'm going to make sure to cut past the hole at an angle so I get all the way through, and then you can take it off. Okay, feel free to dry this a little bit before you do that so you don't misshape it. Center it, open it, still throwing on the hump. Trying to keep the opening as small as I can, knowing that I'm going to make it smaller, just because you can see how small that lid is. Okay. Right. This is something that's going to come in handy also later, is collaring in, because you can see this is how big this is, and the opening is way bigger than that. Okay, so collaring in is like slowly strangling somebody. So I do this with my hands, and I just slowly move it in. Okay, you can kind of start from down here. You just don't want to squeeze in too much at a time, because then it'll buckle on you. You can also kind of come in like this. Alright, let's measure a little bit again. Alright, if this is the size of my lid, then this needs to be the size of my opening. And I'm actually a little bit too small right now, which is not a bad thing to do. Widen it a little bit. Okay, do another measurement. I think that will fit, and if I need to do a little bit of trimming, I can do a little bit of trimming too. This one, I think it's easier to adjust the lid size. So I make the jar first, then the lid. And I'm basically making a cylinder for this type of jar. I'm just going to leave it a little bit thicker at the top so I have room to make that gallery for the lid to fit in. The top of this is pretty thick. You see it's about a 1/2 inch thick. I'm going to make it just even a little bit thicker, so I'm going to do this with my hands, and if you put it on the top of the plate, it kind of compresses the clay and makes it even thicker. So I'm going to push down a little bit. Okay, this part can either be done when you're throwing or when it's leather hardened, you can just trim a little galley, but this part stays and this part gets trimmed just a little bit down so the lid can sit inside there. So you can do it with this tool now. A wooden one's actually better, or you can wait till it's leather hard and then push it down. Let's see how I'm pushing down a nice little area for that lid to sit in. There we go. Okay, so that's where the lid's gonna sit in. Then for this one, it's better if it's a little too big because you can just take a potter's needle or a loop tool later and trim it very easily. All right, is this at least that big? Yes. That's good. I'm going to take all this clay and use it to make a knob. And you can trim it to look like, you know, those fancy staircases. Right, so. You can do a little bit now, a little bit later. If this is this size, then this needs to be this size. So it's too big. Cut it right off like that. Cut it up. Come off. And you can just keep sizing it down that way. Press it again. And you might want to do some final touches. You know, maybe when it's leather hardened, you can trim it a little bit, because that needs to be a little bit smaller. So I would probably leave this on here till it's leather hard and really come in and trim it with a small loop tool to make that much smaller, kind of trim some of this fat stuff up here and make it really nice. But then once you cut it off and kind of sand it off, that should just fit right in there. And you can trim that like usual. So